He didn't flinch, he didn't speak, but he made the loudest statement of all. Welcome to the channel, where true stories meet powerful silence. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button so you never miss the next episode. We've got a special one dropping tomorrow. As we dive into today's powerful story, we'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop your country or city in the comments. We read every one. This channel is more than just storytelling. It's a space to honor discipline, courage, and untold moments that leave a lasting mark. Now sit back, turn up the volume, because this story will stay with you long after the screen fades to black. The convention center buzzed with noise. Thousands moved from booth to booth at the European Defense Expo in Berlin, a spectacle of nations showcasing their military pride. There were tanks painted in neon lights, robotic suits doing push-ups, and soldiers from around the world posing for selfies with tourists. It felt more like a military-themed amusement park than an international defense forum. And somewhere in that chaos stood Ethan Cole. He didn't wear a robotic exosuit or carry a weapon shaped like a video game controller. Instead, he wore history. A crimson tunic, white belt, and a bearskin hat that stood tall above his head. He was a royal guard of the British Army, representing a legacy built over centuries. To most people at the expo, he looked like a wax figure, borrowed from Buckingham Palace, a living souvenir. To Ethan, he was a soldier carrying something heavier than the uniform, the memory of Mason. Mason O'Reilly had been his best friend, a fellow guard, and a brother in arms. They'd trained together, laughed through long nights in Afghanistan. Then one day, Mason didn't come back. An IED blast took him, and all that remained was a worn patch Ethan kept hidden inside his uniform. Now Ethan stood in Berlin, not on a battlefield, but surrounded by flashing cameras and TikTok dancers. Across the aisle, a group of Japanese children giggled and bowed to the Swedish guards dressed in blue. To their right, an American Marine spun a kid around like a playground hero while tourists cheered. The crowd loved it. But when they approached Ethan, expecting a similar show, all they got was silence. No nod, no smile, no movement. Because unlike the others, Ethan was still on ceremonial duty even here. A teenage girl walked up, phone in hand, already live streaming. "Come on, just blink once," she laughed. "You're not even real, are you?" He didn't flinch. She waved a hand near his face, then closer, still nothing. The audience behind her began chuckling. Someone shouted, "Robot mode activated," and the moment turned from playful to mocking. Another voice from the crowd added, "He's just a costume. What's he gonna do?" But Ethan wasn't trained to react. He was trained to endure. Because the uniform he wore wasn't for entertainment. It was a symbol. It meant discipline, honor, service without the need for applause. Behind his still posture, Ethan's mind wasn't on the crowd. It was on Mason. On the time he held his friend's arm in the dust, blood pouring, screaming for help that arrived too late. Mason's last words had been, "Don't break, no matter what." He hadn't broken then. He wouldn't break now, even if the world laughed at him. One by one, more people arrived, phones out, filters on, challenges posted, reactions baited. They poked, they mocked, they dared. But Ethan stayed still. And then something strange happened. A little boy, maybe 6 or 7, stood quietly in front of him. No phone, no noise, just eyes wide open, staring up in awe. After a long pause, the boy whispered to his mother, "Is he a real soldier?" The mother looked down at him, and then up at Ethan. At the straight posture, the polished buttons, the unwavering gaze. "Yes," she said softly. "More real than most people ever know." She didn't take a photo. She just nodded, an unspoken thank you, and walked away. Ethan didn't move, but inside, he exhaled. Maybe that one kid would grow up understanding what honor really looks like, and that was enough. That night, Ethan sat alone in his barracks at the hotel. The room was quiet, the walls blank. He opened the small inner pocket of his tunic and pulled out Mason's patch, faded, frayed but whole. He set it on the table next to his gloves. No spotlight, no comments, no algorithms, just memory and mission. Tomorrow he'd return to the Expo, same uniform, same silence. But maybe this time people would look at him differently. Maybe they'd understand that stillness isn't weakness. It's what holds the line when no one else will. While the crowd dispersed and laughter faded from the boy's innocent question, is he a real soldier? Ethan Cole stood still, but inside something had shifted. For a moment that child's whisper had pierced the noise like a clean breath of air through smog. A rare moment of clarity, but clarity doesn't last long in a place built for spectacle. By the next afternoon, the expo floor was louder, more chaotic than before. The novelty of foreign uniforms had caught fire online. And unfortunately for Ethan, he had become a challenge. Not a soldier, not a symbol, but a target for internet content. It started with a TikToker, mid-20s, shades indoors, phone in hand. He approached with a grin too wide to be friendly. "Let's see if the Queen's toy soldiers can flinch," he joked to the camera, already broadcasting live. He stood inches from Ethan's face, mimicking his stance, smirking for his followers. Then without warning, he let out a scream, a sudden, jarring, guttural yell. Ethan didn't move. Not an inch. But somewhere in his chest, his heart jumped. Not from fear, but fury. The man laughed and turned to his stream. "Damn, this guy's like Buckingham's Terminator." More laughter, more phones. And then came the second wave. A group of YouTubers, 4 of them carrying mics and cameras, claimed they were doing a military appreciation series. They wore fake press badges and approached as if for an interview. But it wasn't an interview. One of them, with a hidden earpiece, began feeding ridiculous questions to his co-host. "Do you sleep in that outfit? Are you allowed to pee? Is that bearskin real, or do you guys just hate animals?" The crowd around them laughed, recording every second. But Ethan didn't crack. He didn't blink. He didn't even breathe heavier, because that's what the uniform required. But inside, he was unraveling. This wasn't just disrespect. It was a performance of mockery, amplified by a world that had forgotten what it means to hold still, for honor, for discipline, for something greater than yourself. And then came the woman, elegant, confident, clearly an influencer. She stepped into his space uncomfortably close and started a live stream. "Okay, guys," she whispered into the mic. "I'm gonna see if I can break him." She blew air into his face, then smiled sweetly and whispered, "If you flinch, I'll donate $100 to the British Army. Fair?" Stillness, then louder. "Come on, just wink or nod. I'll even make it 200. No reaction. So she turned to the camera, pouted, and said the line that boiled his blood. "I guess he's not a real person after all." That one cut deep, because Ethan wasn't just standing for himself. He was standing for Mason, for every soldier who never made it home, for a legacy of men and women who gave everything, often in silence, to protect people who'd never even thank them. And here he was, reduced to a joke. But Ethan didn't lose control. Instead, he shifted. Not his posture, but his perspective. That night, in the temporary barracks assigned for Expo security, he met with the other British guards. They didn't need to speak much. Their eyes said enough. They were tired, not from the standing, but from being paraded like statues. They agreed on one thing. They wouldn't respond with words or with fists, but with precision. And so the next day they stood differently, not individually, but in formation. 5 guards, 1 V-shaped front, feet perfectly spaced, eyes ahead. At 9:03 a.m., another group approached. Phones ready, laughter primed. But before they could open their mouths, the guards did something no one expected. They stamped their heels in unison, one crisp, thunderous crack that echoed through the marble floor. The crowd froze. For a beat, no. One moved, no one laughed, no one filmed. And for the first time in 3 days, silence wasn't awkward. It was respected. That clip, filmed by a bystander, not a prankster, went viral within hours. Captioned, "Respect has a sound." In that moment, Ethan realized something. Stillness wasn't weakness. Silence wasn't passivity. Sometimes the most powerful message is the one delivered without a word, and sometimes the uniform doesn't need to speak, because the weight of what it stands for is loud enough, but sometimes silence isn't enough. That single stomp, sharp, unified, echoing across the expo floor, had stunned the crowd into a brief moment of reverence, but reverence is fleeting in a world addicted to noise. By the next day, the pranksters were back, and this time they were louder, more aggressive, hungrier for views. Ethan Cole knew it wouldn't stop with just one act of still resistance, because people didn't come here to understand. They came to provoke. As the expo rolled into its third day, whispers started to surface online. British guards aren't allowed to fight back. They're just props in fancy coats. Let's see what breaks them first, heat or humiliation. And while Ethan and his unit never said a word, they felt every jab. Behind every camera was a dare. Behind every laugh, a test of dignity. But here's the thing. Not every soldier breaks with a bullet. Some break with ridicule. One of the newer guards, a 23-year-old named Oliver, started showing signs. His hands trembled slightly when adjusting his belt. He avoided eye contact with fellow guards before formation. And that afternoon, after a group of teens surrounded him, playing red light, green light, while live streaming his face, he cracked. Not physically. He didn't shout, didn't move, but a tear formed in the corner of his eye, and someone caught it on video. They zoomed in, slowed it down, overlaid music. When the mannequin cries, they called it. It went viral. And Ethan? Ethan watched it happen. He watched it in silence, jaw locked, fists clenched behind his back where no one could see. He'd lost brothers to war. Real war. Yet this was the first time he truly felt ashamed, not of Oliver, not even of the uniform, but of the crowd. Because this wasn't ignorance anymore. It was cruelty in costume. And so that night, Ethan sat, alone in his temporary barracks staring at his reflection. His boots still shined, his buttons still aligned. But his spirit was fraying. He reached into the inner lining of his red tunic, the place he kept Mason's patch, and held it tight. That patch had seen sandstorms, gunfire, blood, and now it was seeing this. Somewhere in the silence of that hotel room, Ethan made a decision. They wouldn't fight back with words. They wouldn't plead for sympathy. But they would remind the world what true bearing looked like. The next morning, something changed. The guards entered in formation, tight, precise, but Ethan was placed at the front, and beneath his gloves, he'd tucked Mason's patch under the cuff, right above his wrist, out of sight, but not out of strength. As they took their positions, the expo crowd leaned in, phones up, lenses ready. And then, it happened. A man in his 40s, camera slung low, stepped past the barrier line. He pointed at Ethan's face, shouting, "You're not protecting anything here. You're just an actor in a pageant." Security moved in, but Ethan lifted 2 fingers, barely a flick, signaling them to hold. And for the first time, Ethan spoke. Just one sentence, calm, even, sharp as steel. "I stand so others don't have to." The man froze, his voice caught, and the entire hall quieted. Not because the soldier had yelled, but because for once he didn't have to. The crowd slowly backed away. Some clapped. Most didn't know how to react, but one by one they lowered their phones, and for the first time at that expo, they watched without recording. Later that night, the video surfaced anyway, not from a prankster, but from a veteran, an American Marine who'd been watching silently from the back. He captioned it simply, "Courage isn't loud. Sometimes it just stands still." The clip reached 1 million views in 48 hours, but Ethan didn't care, because this story wasn't about views. It was about legacy, about Mason, about Oliver, about standing through storms, whether of bullets or ridicule. And in that moment, he knew. The world may not understand silence, but it still remembers honor. But even honor has limits, especially when silence is mistaken for permission. After Ethan Cole's quiet defiance went viral, there was a strange shift in the air. For a brief moment, the internet held its breath. That short video, Just one sentence spoken with steel, spread like wildfire across veteran forums, Reddit threads, and military pages. People saluted him virtually, called him the man who stood without speaking, and praised the Royal Guard's restraint. But not everyone clapped. For every comment of respect, there were 5 more mocking him. Hero for standing still? Just British cosplay. Let's see if we can get the next one to cry. The Expo organizers saw the spike in attention and leaned in, not to protect the soldiers, but to milk the moment. More press, more coverage, more cameras. That's when it got worse. On day 4, a popular influencer group arrived. Millions of followers, slick production crew. They were known for one thing: breaking silence. Their content specialized in cracking stoic personalities. Buddhist, monks, Navy SEALs, even funeral directors. Now they had their sights on the Royal Guard. They weren't reckless. They were calculated. They set up just 10 feet from Ethan's formation. Multiple angles, boom mics hidden in floral arrangements. And they didn't scream or poke. They used something more dangerous: manipulation. The host, a man in a designer coat, stepped forward with a bouquet of white flowers and approached slowly. His tone was calm, almost reverent. "I brought these for your fallen brother," he said. Ethan's eyes didn't flinch, but his gut clenched. How many tours did he do again? 2, 3? No answer. He was the one who stepped on the IED, right? What was his name? Matthew? Mason? Stillness. But inside, Ethan was burning. This wasn't comedy, it was desecration. The man leaned in closer, flowers trembling in hand, voice softening. "You stand so others don't have to, right?" He mocked, parroting Ethan's own words from the day before. "Tell me, how heavy does guilt weigh in a uniform like that?" That line landed like a sucker punch to the ribs. Ethan didn't move, couldn't, wouldn't, but his breathing deepened. Just enough for those watching closely to know that something inside him was breaking, and that was what they wanted. The influencer turned to camera. "Still no reaction, but don't worry. Guys, we've got 4 more days." He winked, turned his back, and walked away as the crowd chuckled. This time there was no applause, just awkward silence, broken only by the whir of camera drones and the click of upload buttons. Back in the barracks, Ethan said nothing. He didn't need to. His unit felt the tension. They'd all seen the clip by nightfall. Some were furious. Others were numb. But Ethan? He was focused. That night he wrote a letter, not to the influencer, not to the press, but to Oliver, the young guard who had cried. He wrote of Mason, of pain, of dignity, of why sometimes standing still is harder. Then charging forward. Then he folded it and slid it under Oliver's bunk. That letter never went public. What did go public was what happened the next morning. Day 5. No formation, no pageantry. Just one Royal Guard standing alone. Ethan. He requested to stand solo. That day, something rarely approved during a high-traffic event. Command agreed, reluctantly, because he didn't ask out of pride. He asked out of purpose. And when the influencers returned, full crew in tow, ready for round 2, Ethan was waiting, not to react, not to fight, but to finish what silence began. As the cameras rolled, he did the unexpected. He stepped forward, just one step, still in line, still in protocol. Then, from inside his coat, he pulled a single slip of paper, the letter to Oliver, and dropped it gently at his boots. No words, no speech, just that. The moment was captured by a journalist, not an influencer but a real one, who asked later, "What was in that letter?" Ethan simply said, "It wasn't for the cameras." That clip, silent, powerful, defiant, became the story. Not the prank, not the insult, the act of unshakable dignity. Because in a world screaming for attention, Ethan reminded everyone of something deeper. Respect isn't claimed with noise. It's earned in stillness. This story wasn't just about a soldier. It was about restraint in a world that rewards reaction. Now we'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever witnessed someone stand their ground quietly, with dignity, when everyone else chose noise or mockery? Have you ever been misunderstood for showing respect when others were joking around? Drop a comment below and tell us what part of this story moved you most. Was it the pressure Ethan faced? The moment he held back tears? The way he answered not with anger, but with silence and resolve? And most importantly, what does respect mean to you in today's world? We read every single comment, and this space isn't just about the video, it's about the conversations it inspires. Whether you're watching from New York, London, Manila, or Johannesburg, let us know where you're tuning in from, and share your voice. Because stories like these aren't meant to be forgotten. They're meant to remind us that courage doesn't always raise its voice. Sometimes it just stands still. Drop your thoughts below, we're listening.